The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I invite you to be seated. We got stories of healing and leprosy. I love that story of Naaman, the healing of Naaman by Elisha, or by washing in the Jordan. I like to think out here for us, right? It's like Elisha told him, "Go wash in the Pedernales." And he's like, "There's not even water left." It's a trickle and it's dirty because everything's settled down at the bottom. It's gross. There are fantastic, beautiful rivers back where I'm from, the Tigris and Euphrates. There are beautiful, pristine rivers and lakes that you can see all the way bottom to the bottom of. Let me wash in one of them. And they reminded me, "Man, you're complaining over the easy stuff, Naaman. Come on." You would have done something. You would have gone to the ends of the earth for this cure. Oh, I love that. And then Jesus finds himself also kind of in Samaria and in those in-between lands. You know what's interesting, the translation here says, on the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. There's no, region between Samaria and Galilee. That's just the best they could come up with to talk about. He's in the border spot, where you're not quite sure which is which. How many people, I bet the Lures probably know. You know, right where the county line is between when Travis County stops and the other? Because we put a sign there. If there wasn't a sign there, would you know? No. Yeah, you're just kind of in the in-between space. In fact, we've got a name for it out here. We call it Spicewood. It's the in-between space. It's not incorporated as its own place. You see, when I go to describe where Spirit in the Hills is to someone, it usually goes something like this. Well, we're west of Austin, but we're not quite west of the Pedernales. We're in between the suburbs where they stop and where the rural land begins. We're in Spicewood, but not like where the post office and the elementary school and Opie's barbecue are. We're in unincorporated Travis County. We're sort of in this in-between space. In the space between other places. That's where Jesus finds himself, in these borderlands. He's in that in-between space, the threshold. He's not quite in Galilee, but he's also not really in Samaria either. He's in the middle. The border is an interesting place. Border is an interesting place to be. It can be hard to tell whose land it is, so we do things like put signs that say, all right, this is where Burnett County starts. This is where Travis County starts. This is where Blanco County is, for a little blip in the middle. It's often a wilderness place. Not that it's necessarily devoid of population and that it's a desert, but that there aren't so many cities and city centers or so many shops and neighborhoods in the region in between. Jesus enters into the borderlands. He enters into this threshold place where you move from one place to the next. It's defined by what's on either side. It's not even a place unto itself. And he continues his mission of bringing God's wholeness to a broken creation as he heals 10 people with leprosy. In quite a fashion too, right? He's just like, hey, go talk to the priests, and as they go, they're made clean. By the time they get to where they're going, they'll be ready to re-enter society. You see, the Borderlands are the place where you find people like those with leprosy. You find people who are hurting and sick, people who have been shunned by others and don't really have a place here or there. You see, they're sent out of town, but not all the way to the next town. They're cast out of the gathering places and out of the centers to the margins, to the space between. Jesus heals 10 and sends them on their way. And only one returns to give thanks to God. Only one returns to give thanks and praise. And it's one who was even more on the outside than the others. See, between Samaria and Galilee, who knows? We don't know the makeup of all 10 of these people. We don't even know that they're all men. We know that in Greek we use the masculine form just like in Spanish or French, if there's even one guy among them. So we don't know we don't know a lot about these folks, but we know that they're a collection of at least one Samaritan and some Jews, and the only one that comes back is the one who's not supposed to get it. The one who isn't part of the in crowd with the others. It's a Samaritan. And Jesus praises the faith of the one who practices faith differently, yet who knows this is God come near, who takes on a posture of worship, having encountered God with us, Emmanuel, in Jesus. He's encountered the healer of our every ill, the balm that waits those who are sick, the one who was willing to turn his head and do at least the least for these 10. You know, Jesus goes to other border spaces too. He's constantly crossing over to the other side of the sea of the Jordan. He's coming back. He's crossing from one space to another. Jesus comes to the in-between spaces. Jesus comes to this in-between space too. To this borderland. To bring healing and hope. To remind you, you are not forgotten or misplaced, but that God dwells with you. With us. Jesus comes to this in-between time. Right? We've talked about this. You've heard me talk about it, right? And we all still kind of experience this sense of we still seem to be in a threshold in-between space. We can mark it by what was and what we hope comes next. Sometimes with words normal and new normal. We're in this in-between trying to figure it out, this threshold time on the border between what was and what will be. And in the threshold of what comes next, Jesus arrives and offers wholeness in the midst of a broken creation, healing for those who suffer, reconciliation and justice for those who have been cast aside and find themselves in between times and places too. And Jesus comes and replants hope within you for a better, more abundant way of living in love, through love, for love. So I wonder who else in these borderlands with us is here who we have yet to recognize and embrace. I wonder who maybe doesn't share our same way of thinking or believing, yet recognizes the presence of Christ in our midst, like the one who turns back to give praise and thanks. So as I wonder how Jesus is calling us to partner with him in this in-between space and this in-between time, something our strategic planning team has been doing for a year at this point, and we're really close to ready to share that with all of you. We shared it with council, and they were excited to hear. We're doing a little more refining, and we're going to share you, and it's what we've heard from you, how we've heard Jesus in Scripture, in the members of this congregation, and out in community, how we've heard this answer of this is an in-between space and time. In fact, we started a lot of our listening conversations acknowledging the in-betweenness that we're in, the turmoil, the liminal space, the threshold, the border space between what was and what will be. And we heard some amazing ways that God was calling us to, because we know Jesus is moving ahead of us, leading the way into the borders for the sake of bringing shalom. Jesus is asking us to follow him through the threshold, to trust in what comes next, knowing God will be with us. Jesus is asking us to build relationships with those who've been told they aren't worth the time, who would only yell for help from afar, thinking no one wants to come close to them. Jesus is calling us to be his hands and feet, healing and bringing hope. Jesus is waiting to meet us in the very people we least expect to find him. Maybe even those who are from a foreign place and don't have the same faith system that we do. Jesus is walking ahead of us to lead the way, beside us to support us, and behind us to keep us moving ever toward God's mission of justice and reconciliation, of love abundant and life everlasting, now and forever. Jesus is in this in-between place and time with us today and each day. Thanks be to God.